Hey everybody, this is Al. We are here at the Kelly Writers House on September 21st, 2016 for week 2 live webcast. We're very excited because we have some special friends here. First of all, sitting to my left is Joe Massey, the wonderful poet Joe Massey. Hello, Joe. You have to talk right into the mic, Joe.
Okay.
I just realized that Joe has participated in webcasts, but this is his first time doing one here, getting to see all the insides and outsides of it. So
Very
thank
impressive.
you, Joe. And for those in the room, can we just acknowledge and thank Joe? Acknowledge Joe and thank him for making the trip with some snaps and some applauses. Thank you, Joe. And the second caller, not the first caller, ha ha. The second caller, Zach, is going to get Zach a copy of the book I'm holding. Zach, yeah. It's called Illocality. It was published in 2015. It was acknowledged, awarded prizes and great reviews by lots of people, including the New York Times. And that, I hope, sold a few copies.
Oh, good. Well,
Illocality. It's a really great book. So the second caller will send this to them. Okay, let me just say hello to an amazing Emily Harnett. Hello, Emily. Want to talk into the mic?
Sure, I do.
This is
Hello,
Emily.
Al.
Hello, Davey Niddle sitting to my right. Hello, Davey.
Hi, Al.
Thank you for. Can we bring Davey's mic up in the room? Thanks so much for bringing coffee for us, and that's great. Gabe Ojeda Segay. Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. And sitting next to Gabe is an empty seat, which we'll ask people in the audience maybe to sit. And there's Jason Zuska, author of, among other things, Heat Wake. Heat Wake, as in heat wave, Heat Wake. And this has a poem. Joe's couple of poems from Illocality are in ModPo Plus, and a poem called Connected, which is about ModPo, sort of.
Yes, in part, yes.
In part. And it's also partly about this
about
gesture.
Yes. It's about Al's finger.
It's about Al's finger.
This finger.
Yeah, okay. And then in the Google Hangouts, we have Dave Poplar. Hello, Dave. Unmute yourself and say hello.
Good afternoon, Al, and everybody.
Looking good, Dave. Erica Kaufman is coming to us from the Hudson Valley, and the last time I heard you pronounce your last name, it was Kaufman, and I'm feeling abashed for calling you Kaufman.
Hi, Al.
Do you care?
I don't care. Either way is fine.
Okay, great. Welcome. It looks like you're in your office. It's a very festively decorated office. Max McKenna coming in from Chicago. Hello, Max.
Hi, Al.
Hey, it was good to see you this past weekend. That was so much fun.
It was great. I had an awesome time.
Yeah. And Molly O'Neill is coming from Los Angeles. Hello, Molly.
Good morning,
Hi.
everyone.
It is 9:08 a.m. in Los Angeles, and there's Mal. Hello to everybody. Just a couple of shout-outs, and we'll get started with questions about week 2. First, a shout-out to Leyli Salayeva, who's from Baku, Azerbaijan. She's joined ModPo. She's a poet who's hoping for recognition in English-speaking countries. She has 2 books. They have been translated by her into English. I already wrote her and asked her to send us a copy. She loves the course, and she says it's already, quote, sharpened my vision, and gives praise to the TAs in the videos. And through ModPo, Leyli seeks to understand, through poetry and ModPo, quote, the culture of another world. So welcome, and I know she's tuning in today from Azerbaijan. So hello to Leyli. Welcome to the ModPo community. A couple of announcements. Mandana Chaffa, the great Mandana from New York, wanted me to announce the first New York City meetup on Saturday, September 24th. That's this coming Saturday. All the information, location, poems to be discussed, it's all in the New York City meetup thread under study groups and meetups. So find out what's going on there and meet up at noon on Saturday. Second announcement, the CCCR, the Community Collaborative Close Readings page, as of tonight, will be adding 2 videos made by Eleanor Smagorinsky, who got together with a poet friend of hers in New South Wales and created a 2-part video discussion, close reading of Jason Zuska's aforementioned ModPo Plus poem, Connected. It is now officially crowdsourced, which is exactly what the poem's sort of about, so there you go. And 2 more quick announcements. This week we're writing essay number 1 on Emily Dickinson. You have an option of writing on 4 Dickinson poems. Please make sure you go to the My Submissions tab where you'll see the options for the poems. If you don't go there, you won't see the options for the poems. So we'd like you to submit those essays before Sunday if possible, and then next week we will be doing peer reviews, and very soon I'll be sending out instructions for how the peer reviews work in the new site. ModPo is very, even in the new Coursera platform, ModPo is very unusual, and a hack was done just last night by our friend Mira at Coursera to make peer reviewing possible for those who didn't write essays, which is crucial, right? So not only those who wrote essays, but those who didn't write essays will have access to essays to do peer reviews of. So, and today here, we're going to be talking about chapter 2 poems, and we can get started with a phone call already. And Lily today, because Anna is out, Lily today is going to handle the phone, so thank you so much, Lily, for dusting off your phone connection skills. Lily, who's on the phone?
This is Emily Proctor.
Great. Hello, Emily.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can, thank you.
Great. Chris, can we bring her up any more without feedback? Sure. Great. Emily, how are you?
I'm doing well.
You like week 2?
Yeah, very much.
What do you like about it most of all?
Well, they're all new poets for me,
Uh-huh.
and so that's been really great to get introduced to some new poets.
Yeah, so even Ginsberg is new to you?
Oh, sorry, not Ginsberg.
Okay. Even William Carlos Williams is new to you?
And not William, sorry.
Okay. So you mean
Sid
Laurie
Corman is new,
Niedeker.
and Niedeker is new.
Sid Corman. Yeah, and Ray Armantrout.
Yes.
Great. And this is your first year in ModPo, but I would suggest that in the slow po season, the off season, which starts after the 10-week symposium mode. Davey, is that a little too fancy calling it the symposium mode?
No, I think that's fair.
Thank you, Davey. You're such a yes man. Acknowledge and assent to anything. What was I saying? Oh, ModPo Plus. You know, I would highly recommend, Emily, that after we're all done moving through the 10 weeks very rapidly, that you go back to week 2 and look at ModPo Plus, where you'll find some other stuff. Okay, so did you have a question about one of these poets?
Yeah, well, especially since you have Joe Massey here, I thought I'd ask a question about Sid Corman.
Please.
It isn't for want. I found myself like continuing to kind of come back to just that first line because I found myself trying to paraphrase it as it isn't because of I have something to say, instead of it isn't because I don't have something to say.
Mm-hmm.
It could because so I just wondered if you could say a little bit about the difference between those two meanings.
Yeah. Great question. Joe, you want to take a crack at the complicated logic that Sid uses there?
Well, I've never heard it as because. It isn't because of, for want, or in lieu of anything else. It isn't for want is such a direct address that there is nothing else in the poem except this communication that's happening. So I don't hear a because. I hear the poem saying exactly what it says. And that in itself can be a complicated and kind of almost an impossible idea. But this poem attempts to pull that off. So there's nothing, it's not in lieu of anything. It actually isn't for want of anything else.
Does that help, Emily?
No.
I guess I can't help but hear a because, a reason for writing the poem. The reason is to detain you. The reason I'm writing is to detain you. It's not because the reason I'm writing the poem is not because I don't have anything to say.
I think that's, I mean, Joe has thought about this poem. It's probably in his head every day,
Yeah.
for better or worse. But I just want to add that I think what Emily, and tell me if I'm getting this wrong, Emily. I think what Emily is saying is, not Joe, Sid. Sid is telling us there's some things that the poem or my poetry or my life or my writing, there are things that are possible but not the main thing that I want to talk about. So he's basically saying, that's not it, and that's not it, and that's not it. But what it really is this. And however a reader gets to that is okay. Does that make sense?
That's it. It does make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's the double negative in that first line just is discombobulating.
Well, why don't we let's take advantage of this moment to ask TAs spread around here at the table and in Google Hangouts. We'll listen to Sid recite the poem, and then I'd like to go around and get a number of people saying what they think it is. It isn't for want of something to say, something you should know, but to detain you. It is to detain you. What is it? I know we all feel strongly about our answers, but I'd love to hear them. So here we go. Here's Sid. Ready, Chris?
All right. It isn't for want of something to say, something to tell you, something you should know, but to detain you, keep you from going, feeling myself here as long as you are, as long as you are.
That "r" is in my head. It's an earworm. Okay, we're going to go around and get like one phrase or one word answers. What's it? And Dave Poplar, what do you think it is?
Well, I associate that a lot with the word want, and I just wanted to focus on that for a second because that word is such a great word to me because here it could mean lack or dearth, but want is also a desire. It's a thing. It can be a thing in and of itself, not just the absence of a thing. So perhaps that it is really referring to, in some way, that desire.
Okay, thank you. Erica, that was more than one word or one phrase, but that's Dave. Thank you, Dave. Erica, what is it?
That's a really hard question.
I know.
I want to think about it as being language.
Language. Language isn't about something to say or something to tell you or something you should know, but to keep you here.
Yeah.
It's language. Max, what's it?
I want to agree with Dave. I think it's desire, but not the same desire as wanting something. It's whatever desire Corman is trying to articulate here in this poem.
Okay. Molly?
I guess for me, Sid's it feels like Emily's this.
Yes.
So
the work of the writing. Okay. Gabe?
Yeah, that's more along the lines of what I was going to say. I was going to also say like prolificness, because we know that Sid Corman wrote immense amounts of work. And the it might not just be this individual poem, but the
All
writing.
this. Like everything. Okay, I can't wait to hear Joe on this. Davey, it?
I think I'm going to come between the poem and desire and think about it as the impetus for writing the poem. That I'm compelled to write this poem not for want of something to say, but to detain you.
Great. Emily?
Yeah, I also think of it as stuttering, as a kind of form of stuttering that this poem takes, which kind of starts over and over again, especially with the dashes.
Mm-hmm. Jason?
It is the poem.
Lily?
I agree with Davey, the gesture of writing the poem.
Okay. And I would say, and Joe, you get the last word on this, I would say it's whatever this is, it's the opposite. The opposite of indexical language that can point to a thing in the world and be done with the job. Whatever is the opposite of that, which is dramatically open, ongoing, as in Gabe's answer, all this. I think of a poem by Wallace Stevens called Gray Room, and he goes through a bunch of description of someone in a room, and at the end he says, what is all this? And then the last line is, I know how furiously your heart is beating. Never mind the end, but the thing is, when he says, what is all this, he's saying, a little like Williams in Portrait of a Lady, what am I doing? But Sid knows what he's doing. He's trying to keep you here somehow. Joe, final thought?
Well, the it is all of those things. Like Dave was saying, the want in the sense of desire, the it could be a beloved or some other, or even just the reader. But lately when I read the poem, the it, as Jason said, is the poem. It's the poem itself. I mean, the poem is almost an ars poetica to me.
Yes. And it's become that for ModPo, I think.
Yeah.
Great. Emily Proctor, thank you for calling. Do you have owls or children or dogs in the background there?
I have a 6-month-old in my lap.
Oh, a 6-month-old named Sid, I hope?
No, Julian Thomas.
Julian. Hello, Julian, future ModPoer.
Hopefully.
Thank you, Emily, for calling. Hang with
Thank
us.
you.
Stay with us all 10 weeks, okay?
Okay. Thank
Great.
you. Bye.
Zach, I want you to grab the mic and please tell people what's going on with the Facebook group feed. Do you have a mic you can grab? Here's Zach explaining stuff.
So we actually wound up having 2 different Facebook streams. The older one is now canceled and dead, and there's a new live stream. So if you go to the Facebook ModPo page now, or if you're already at the page, just refresh it. And,
so I'm refreshing it.
And then there
Facebook
should be a
group,
live.
and I should see a second. It says attachment unavailable, but that must be it. And people are saying, got it, thanks, glad it's working. Okay, good.
Cool. Yep.
Good. Thank you, Zach. All right, we have a second caller, and in the meantime, while we're waiting for that, I would like to play a call that came in through the voicemail, and that voicemail is 512, which is like a Texas exchange, I believe. 512, there's somebody out there. 512-95-ModPo, that's the voicemail. And of course, the number for calling directly is 215-573-9752. And I wanted to acknowledge in the room we have Mary. Hi, Mary, a CTA. Eric, also a CTA. Stephanie Nelson has joined us. Josh Klein. Susan has joined us. Hi, Susan. And Katie. So glad you guys are all here. We're hoping to get one of you at the table. In fact, how about Katie? Would you like to come up to the table? All right, you're so game. Katie Hartman, come on up. I'm not sure what question you'll get, but so we're going to play a message that came to the voicemail, ModPo voicemail, by Linda Ireland, and she is in New South Wales, Australia, and she has a question, and here it is.
Hi to Al and all the members of the team from Linda Island in New South Wales, where I'm on a different time zone. I've heard it mentioned on more than one occasion that the analysis of poetry by a reader is a creative act within itself.
She just said that she's heard it said that the act of analysis of close reading is a creative act in itself.
This must be a new idea to people in this course who might be struggling to pin a poem down to a single definitive interpretation. Joe and the panel, what is your take on this idea of the reading of a poem being a creative act? Do poets of published works celebrate such openness? Who owns the ideas in a published poem once it enters the public domain? Thank you and all the best.
That's Linda Ireland calling from Australia. Katie, could you move like 6 inches to your right so I can see my friends in the Google Hangout? Okay, so I would like a few people to answer that question. I would say Max, Lily, and Joe, would you take a crack at the question, can interpretation be creative? I know Lily has thought about this a lot, so why don't you start, Lil?
Yeah, I actually think that this is kind of what we mean when we talk about poems that invite the reader to take a step towards them in making meaning in interpretation, rather than poems that kind of like just have objective meaning that we're supposed to kind of decipher and figure out on our own or something. So like this idea that the space between this, like the poem takes a step forward and you take a step towards the poem, and then you create some meaning there. So like it's important to bring other people with you in that step, because you know, you can collaboratively make a lot more meaning out of the, like I guess bottom line, that sounded probably kind of crazy, but I think of this all in like sort of a geometric or like landscape type of a reading, where like the poem creates a space for meaning making but isn't necessarily delimiting the only space that's there.
Very well put. Could you, since we're going to turn to Max, would you give Eric the mic?
Oh yeah, Jason has the mic.
And sorry, Jason. And Eric, when we come around, I hope you can say briefly something about that space, because I think you and I, a number of people, believe that the collective act of interpretation creates what might be called a third space that has its own significance. And I know that we could go on about that, but I wonder if you'll say something briefly about it. Max, Linda Ireland's comment about it sounds, she said some people in ModPo might think it's an odd notion because poetry is supposed to be there and you're supposed to get it and you remain you and the poem remains the poem and the poet remains the poet and there is no merging. And we actually argue something different. So what do you want to say about that?
I think this creativity or this productivity.
We're not getting sound from Max.
Third space is.
Sorry, Max. We can't. Go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Now we can. Start over, please.
I think this creativity or this productivity is evident in the sheer fact. I mean, it's evident in the forums. It's evident just in the history of papers that have been written on literature. I mean, just the conversation we're having here about a short poem like Sid Corman's is potentially thousands of words, if not hundreds of pages or thousands of pages of dialogue, commentary, ideas, all coming from a poem that's like 25 words long or something. So like the size of a tweet. So yeah, there's like, I think that there is just already like a product there. It's essentially creative.
Terrific. Thank you, Max. Joe, you want to take a crack at this? Is it real? Is it just bullshit that we say that the act of interpretation is a co-creation? Is that just a fancy word?
Oh, it's not bullshit at all. It's just true. I mean, it's inevitable that the act of reading anything, whether it's the back of a cereal box or whatever, is a creative act. You're engaged in making meaning with the language that's there. And in poetry, it's just a much more highly intensified process. And for me, it's the pleasure of reading. I wouldn't want a poem to just give me everything and then I could just put it away and that's it.
And yet so much of the common understanding of poetry is like it's a nugget you have in your wallet that you can consult. I think people do carry poems in their wallets. There's nothing wrong with that. But that it becomes a kind of product that you keep your subjectivity and the poem has its objectivity, and once you get it, you got it. And we're saying something really different, and it is kind of countercultural. No? I mean, do you feel like you're in a minority when you say things like, when I engage with Sid, we are creating something together?
No, even people I know, like family members, for instance, who don't really read poetry, they read a poem and they expect to get it right away. But even in their confusion, that's still a creative act. They're trying to figure it out. They're engaging the text.
Yes.
So I think it's just a matter of changing one's perspective. Anybody can read and enjoy poetry.
Thank you. We're going to turn to Eric for his comment in a second, but what I want to do is ask anyone at the table or in the Hangouts, and if you're in the Hangout, just kind of wave at me so I know you have something to say. Can we name some poems this week, 2 or 3 of them, that are very explicit about encouraging co-creation in the act of reading? We've already talked about one, and that's Sid Corman's It Isn't for Want, because many people believe that it's a love poem, but it's also about the crucial nature of the relationship between the reader who's actually there making Sid live, even though he's dead. But are there other poems? Katie Hartman, can you think of one? It's kind of putting you on the spot, sorry. Does anybody have a poem this week that's explicit about co-creation?
The Way? Oh.
The Way. You would pick the hardest one, Emily. Can we bring Emily's sound up a little bit, Chris? Say something brief about The Way.
Yeah, The Way is all about the process of discovering yourself and the process of reading, of creating yourself through reading pretty explicitly.
It's sort of like, in a way, portrait of the writer-reader as a young girl.
Exactly.
And then, okay, that's a good one. Is there another one? Everybody's drawing a blank. Mal? Oh, Davey's got one.
I would make an argument for a supermarket in California.
That's what I was
Whoa! A supermarket in California. Okay,
Because
say why.
You're imagining, because Ginsberg is imagining reading as an embodied experience with another person. And I can't read that poem without thinking about the poem as a body, without thinking about having a subjective relationship between my body as a reader and the poem's body, between Whitman as poet and Whitman as embodied person in a supermarket space.
Can you riff on some grand analogies here? I'll get you started and then go for it. Okay, so Alan is to the lonely old grubber who he fantasizes as Walt. So you have a reader-writer relationship. As what is to what? We who are Ginsberg-like in our longing in conventional America are to that feeling incredibly marginal in a supermarket in the middle of the night. As what is to what? Can we go further with this? Because you're suggesting that we're implicated in that marginality, I think.
Yeah, I think that Ginsberg's readership of Whitman is to an embodied experience of Whitman, as our readership of Ginsberg is to an embodied experience of Ginsberg. So that Ginsberg creates the supermarket space in which he's hanging out with Whitman, and we get a kind of similar material space out of his poem.
Davey, you're amazing. So, I really haven't thought about this poem in this way. You're creating, it's not just a ModPo lineage, Whitman to Ginsberg to us. It's real. It's like there's a Whitmanian strain in that feeling outside of mainstream society, and Walt is going to give it to us. And the hobo in the supermarket in California in the middle of the night.
Though that's also like
Gabe?
a very specific kind of lineage too. Like Whitman to Ginsberg to us is not only like a ModPo lineage, like a syllabus, but it's also like Ginsberg saw himself as connected to Walt Whitman as like a gay person or some version of a gay person. And he saw himself connected to Whitman in a like quite literal sexual sense. Like Ginsberg talked about how he had sex with this guy who had sex with this guy who had sex with this guy. And if you trace it back far enough, he'd get to Whitman. And so he like quite literally saw himself as like having sex with Walt Whitman in the reading space.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Only two guys. It's only two guys.
Yeah, it's like a very short lineage. It's actually
It's a
surprisingly short
That's
lineage.
right. Eric knows the, I don't know if we call this literary history, but the sexio literary history. One more. I'll throw, Katie. Yeah.
Say something?
Yes.
Sure.
Katie
Hi.
Hartman, you're on.
I was going to say the Niedecker Poet's Work poem. I think, like,
Poet's Work.
obviously that poem is about poet's work, as the title suggests, and I think that in calling the act of writing poem her trade, it's sort of implying that there's a product and the poem is the product, and the product wouldn't work as a trade if there wasn't someone to consume it and there wasn't a relationship between the people who
Wow.
were engaging in it.
Cool. So there's exchange going on. So Lorraine Niedecker there isn't being just straight out anti-capitalist to grandpa. She's saying, I got my own exchange of value going on, and it depends on the reader encountering this poem because that's an exchange, because I'm making a useful product. Wow, that was really cool. And then one more, and then Eric, and that is, of course, remember we're talking about the reader? Of course, you are my friend. If that's not like Sid saying it isn't for want of something to say, but to detain you, you are my friend. So you are my friend may be her own hand, it may be her husband Al or somebody she goes fishing with, but it also might be us, because we are inside the mending kit too. I like that one. Okay, Eric, do you even remember the question?
Well,
Third space, co-creative, be quick.
So I want to do this as a kind of shout out to the teachers who are in this course, and to say that moving on from John Dewey to Louise Rosenblatt. Now, many of you will know Louise Rosenblatt's work. Some of you will not know her work. She is the author of the poem, the reader of the text of the poem, The Transactional Theory of the Literary Work.
Say it again.
Sure. The reader, the text, the poem, The Transactional Theory of the Literary Work, which she wrote when she was about 90, which should be something for everyone in ModPo to realize. Productivity, engagement, doing something amazing can happen at any age. Her first famous book, Literature as Exploration, written in 1938. 1978 later, she's still writing books that everybody is reading. She's talking about the space that the reader brings to the poem from their own experience, how meaning is made, and to some extent also the space that we can create when we create spaces for people to talk together, and through community and collaboration find meanings that individually may not be accessible to us.
So well put, and so succinct, and so interesting as always. And Eric, we all owe you a debt as being one of the people now who's thinking about what that space means. And we're going to turn to the caller. I just want to add one more thing, and that is that when the Writers' House was founded 20 years ago, the real thinker behind it was a guy named Bob Lucid, who's since passed, who was my mentor and hired me here at Penn, and he kept telling me, interpretation is not enough, architecture is destiny. He used to say, interpretation is not enough, architecture is destiny. That's a rather fatalistic view, but what he meant was not architecture, but space. If you can create a space in which people come together to do this kind of thing, then you will have made something that is permanent. Now, once ModPo started, actually prior to that for Writers' House, once we started reaching out, we still have the idea of the Writers' House, which makes ModPo as a MOOC distinct, because everybody is able to imagine that a room exists and that we are in this room and that the room in the videos is real and that you can essentially come to that room. And that is a space in which the occupation of this occurs, a house of possibility. And so this is a MOOC, but it's a MOOC with a base that's a real place that all you have to do is imagine, kind of like Dorothy, and click your heels and you're here. We have a phone caller, and this is the person who gets a book. So whoever the caller is getting a copy of this, and what is the caller's name?
This is Chris, a.k.a. Grass, who called last week, and Anna thought that his name was Grass, which gave us all a laugh.
And Chris got a book last week.
Yes. Wow. He has a question about my favorite poet from this week, Ray Armantrout, about the poem The Way.
All right, well, let's bring Chris up. Zach, I'm holding a book that you should look at. Hello, Chris, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. We know you're Chris now. Christopher is the full name, C-R-I-S. And
right.
We called you Grass last week by accident, and I made a
yes,
silly
and
poem.
I wrote a poem about it, and
Your
it was
ass
awesome.
is grass. Yeah. But you're really active in ModPo, and
I am extremely active in ModPo.
Yeah,
I'm
we
on the
already
forums
love
all
you.
The time.
Yeah.
Huh?
We already love you, and that's a rather loose word of love, but I mean, we already feel affection toward your participation, and you're getting another book, although I'm going to put, after this, I'm going to put a ban on your winning books. This is Joe Massey's, This is Joe Massey's book called Illocality, and Lily will get your address and we'll send it to you. So,
Okay, awesome.
You have a question about Ray Armantrout?
Yes. The whole idea of eavesdropping and then using lines from different conversations that you eavesdropped and putting together a collage, is that something that Ray Armantrout basically started?
It's a great question, and we're going to give you, that could be an elaborate answer. We're going to give you a short answer, but then we'll look at the poem. The shorter answer is that there is a great tradition in, of course, pre-modern writing, but modernism, one of modernism's great signal achievements is allowing lots of voices to enter the poem, and there is a lot of experimentation in visual art in the 20s with collage, but then there are poets who are interested in collage, so the Dadists were interested in doing it semi-accidentally, and this is a tradition that goes up to today. And I would just urge you to get excited about week 4. At the end of week 4, we're actually going to be studying Tristan Zara's cut-up exercise, and then in week 9, chapter 9.2, week 9, we're going to be doing chance operations poems. But I'd like to get a couple of people just saying something about the importance of a postmodern or contemporary poet allowing lots of voices into the poem. So I'm going to ask Jason and Erica just to comment briefly on that quality, please. Okay. Jason first.
All of what comes to mind is in my book that's on the table, I had people make butter in small glass jars, and I videotaped it, and everything they said I used to make the poem.
Everything they said during the butter melting exercise.
During the butter making.
Butter making,
It was from heavy cream to butter.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that I don't think that was an innovative action that really relies on going back to, say, like the films of Andy Warhol, or further back to even thinking of The Wasteland by Eliot.
Section 2 of The Wasteland is Voices
Yeah.
in the Pub.
Yeah.
Right? Very good. Erica, do you want to say one quick thing about this mode? Because obviously it has political and ethical implications, we all believe, I think.
Well, I'm somebody who works procedurally, so a lot of the way that I write my own poems is figuring out how to ethically engage other voices through different kinds of chance operations and sometimes not so chance operations. So I think that this is an evolving tradition that, I'm thinking about yesterday. I was teaching Shakespeare, and an early critic of Shakespeare said that he was a terrible playwright because he was unoriginal, because he worked in historical sources into his plays.
Right.
So I think that this idea of drawing from the living world around you is something that's been around and changes as the world changes.
Right. And it is one of the signal lessons, if there is such a thing in ModPo, which is we move from the singular authoritative voice that knows the world and wants to convey it to you, right, to a voice that listens to all voices, and starting in our course with Walt Whitman's Blab of the Pave, actually tries to reproduce the action and sound of the street in that case. And there it is a democratic action, and multi-vocality becomes an exercise in learning to listen to what's around you. And I think that's what the way is. So Lily wants to say something about that, and then we're going to play the recording of Ray reading The Way and talk about it for a minute. Lily?
Oh, I was just going to say, like, it's interesting to bring this conversation in with the word genius, which we get from Danse Russe this
Who
week.
shall say I am not the happy genius of my household?
Right. So I've been really interested in thinking about the concept of genius as in, like, singular genius, like one person is the genius who puts together the poem, versus like what we get from Ray is a little bit different than that, but it's also maybe a more contemporary idea than where the rest of the poems in this week are.
Yes, and we're going to see another side of Williams when in Portrait of a Lady in the modernist period, because this is not modernism, where he is doubting the voice. Okay, Chris, I'm going to play The Way, but I'm going to ask you to hang up and listen to it offline. And we want to thank you for calling. Thank you for being such a good ModPo citizen.
Can I just say one thing?
Please.
I had posted in the sub forum about her poem. It was eavesdrop equals collage, or collage equals eavesdrop, and I got into this conversation with Meredith, one of the mentors.
Yeah.
And, James Ritter has the ongoing poetry game where he gives 10 words, and we put together a poem with the 10 words, and whoever gets the most votes gets to put out the next 10 words. Well, Meredith and I came up with an idea to have another game of collages where people use eavesdropping to add a line. Each person adds a line or two here and there
Like
to a
Exquisite
poem.
Corpse, yes.
Yeah, do a
great.
collage together. So
Great.
Now I said, could one of the mentors pin it so that it would be able to be seen throughout, time, throughout the sessions or whatever. And she was saying something about they really want to keep the pin threads more for like technical issues and different things like that. But I was wondering if we could have permission to pin the thread if I start it.
Chris, you've done two things here you've done that are good. One is you've pitched and boosted and ballyhooed this creative activity that goes on in ModPo, which we love. And if a thread is very active, it's going to rise to the top. We have to be careful about the pin threads because it will dominate the front page. But we have ways of doing it. And once the ModPo Symposium mode of 10 weeks is done, and we go into the slow po mode or the off season, there are going to be lots of opportunities for creative acts in reading groups and other such things. So thank you for the
Okay.
call, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks,
Okay,
Chris.
and then Lily's got to get my address.
Yeah, Lily's going to do
I'm sorry
that.
I got 2 books, but you don't have
Don't
to give me any more.
apologize.
Even
Don't
if
apologize.
I am the second caller.
It's cool. All right, great. And I'll just
All right,
add,
I love you guys, man.
love you
Thank
too,
you so much.
Chris.
You have inspired me and motivated me. You just don't even know how much.
Oh, it's great. Thank you, Chris. Thanks so much for calling. Yeah, and Chris won't mind me saying this, but he was very skeptical and anxious at the beginning of the course, and I think now he understands what the ModPo community is about. I'll just add Ray Maxwell's tweet. Blending many voices is a choir, but setting them all free to improvise is the way. I'm going to say that again. Ray Maxwell, man, that is amazing. All right. Blending many voices is a choir, but setting them all free to improvise is the way. From Mozart to Coltrane. Hashtag ModPo Live. He did, yeah, you just didn't see it. Yeah. Way to go, Ray. That's really good. All right. So I just want to announce something that Joe is going to do. Are we okay with this?
Absolutely.
Okay, Joe Massey, the very talented poet and friend of the Writers' House and participant now for at least 3 years in ModPo, is going to come back to ModPo in the winter or spring. We'll announce when. And he is going to lead a 2-month reading group on Sid Corman. So he is going to, so what we're trying to do, yes, and even the phone is celebrating. What we're going to try to do is create ModPo, because this is now an open session, the only MOOC in Coursera now that is open as opposed to a session. It's an open session, an ongoing one. This responds to Chris's interests. And so we're going to do something like this and then invite anybody, poets and others who want to work with Joe, to use the ModPo site as a reason for coming in, whether or not you did the 10 weeks of ModPo or not, as a free space, free and open, so that Joe can hang out with people who are interested in Sid. So Joe, thank you.
Oh, you're quite welcome. The discussions in the forums have been so energizing for me and exciting to be able to talk about Sid, my old friend and mentor. So to have a more concentrated time with some of his work with other ModPoers would be, I think, a really great experience.
Thank you. I'm really excited about this. Thank you, Joe Massey. I'm going to play The Way. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but I'm going to play it. It's very difficult. It's the most difficult poem this week. And for those of you who are nervous about things getting difficult, Josh, are you nervous? Things are going to get difficult. Would you and Katie swap? Let's get Joe up here. Josh. For those who are nervous, you have a reason to be nervous if you don't get The Way. The Way is actually a lot like the poems we're going to be encountering after a while in this course. So here, Chris Martin, are we ready? Here is Ray Armentrout performing The Way.
The Way. Card in pew pocket announces, I am here. I made only one statement because of a bad winter. Grease is the word, Grease is the way. I am feeling real-life emergencies or flubbing behind the scenes. As a child, I was abandoned in a story made of trees. Here's the small gasp of this clearing, come upon, again.
And come upon, and again are in quotes. All right, we're going to go around. We don't do this often because it takes a long time. But starting with Dave Poplar, and then Erica, Max, Molly, Josh, Gabe, Davey, Joe, Emily, Jason. We're going to go around. And I want you to say any one thing about this poem. Anything, but it's got to be brief. Something that people might have missed. Now remember, we did a video about this poem, so it's not as if it's totally alien to people. So Dave, can you say one thing about Ray Armentrout's The Way? Please?
I love the line, flubbing behind the scenes, and I love that it's the only one that takes up a single line, makes it stand out.
Cool. Erica Kaufman.
I am feeling.
Yeah, what do you think that's doing?
Lots of amazing things. The line break before it really makes that line for me.
Yeah. And she respects the line break in the performance. Grease is the word. Grease is the way. I am feeling. It's almost comic, but yes, I am feeling. And this is a poem that's been said because it's so multivocal and so not subject, not her, that I am feeling becomes almost ironic because it's other people who are doing the I. Yes, great. Max?
The small gasp. I love gasp as offset, and a small gasp is so much lovelier than a big gasp.
Yeah. Yeah, big gasp is like, woohoo! Like, the earth is rumbling under my feet. Big revelation. But small gasp is, right? Yeah, it's cool. All right, Mal, a thought?
I'm thinking about Grease as a little snippet of collective childhood memory and the things that we associate with movies we see when we're young.
Yeah. And I love that line from Grease. Grease is the word. I'm not singing it, but I'm hearing it in my head. Yeah, there's a memory. That's good, Mal. There's a memory there. Josh? Hey, this is Josh. Right up to the mic, Josh.
Hey, everybody. I think my attention goes to the word here. We have this from Emily. We have now from Whitman. We're talking about Sid's space, and now we have here. Perhaps Armentrout's geography, this space of the story that is perhaps the destination of if you take the way, you will be here. Perhaps here is the journey that you complete on the way. She doesn't specify it, but we have a new thing.
Josh, where the fuck did you come from? Josh.
Chicago, Illinois.
That's so great. Yes. Here's the small gasp. Here it is. Here's where I get lost in the woods. Here's where I'm Hansel and Gretel. Here's where I learn how to read. Here. That's so cool. Gabe, top that.
I wanted to point out just like the way Ray Armentrout reads, not to use the way in my answer, but
you did.
Her manner of reading. Like to me, a Ray Armentrout reading always sounds like at the end of it, she's gonna sort of like slap her knee and like do a little like, because it's like it sounds like almost like a dirty joke or like a little like euphemism that she's saying. So she's like, card in pew pocket announces I am here. Like it sort of has this
I don't know if Ray's going to love hearing that, but
that's fine. But I think it's actually, I think it seems very purposeful to me because it's not how she speaks. And then what's good about that is like everything sounds euphemistic. Everything sounds like somebody else is saying it. So in the first half of this, you have these like quoted statements that are being framed in this way that maybe it sounds like they're being quoted, but then at the end when it becomes a more personal narrative or something like that, it's still in that mode. So of this clearing come upon again, like it doesn't sound like there's this like very natural or melodramatic shift. She keeps this sort of like irony to the whole thing.
That's good. Thank you. Davey?
I want to go back to what you were saying, Al, about being able to hear and not hear. Grease is the word in the way that it's borrowed. And those lines stand out to me. Grease is the word, Grease is the way I am feeling, because they create a kind of counter musicality. And what I mean by that is I feel like I have to actively push against the like onslaught of that music to be like, no, I'm asserting this poem against all of that noise. And that tension, that all of the other noise that this excerpted language, this borrowed language could come with, being able to push against that creates sort of a beautiful tension that Ray's really reading into, that she creates a lot of space around her lines when she reads, and thinking about the poem as something that's poised between different kinds of forces that like is a keystone within a frame of sound is something that feels like it's doing a lot of work for me here.
Wow, Davey, I am surrounded by smart people, and it is the best feeling. Joe?
Just a small point. I love Ray's work. I've read it for years. It's one of my favorite poets.
This poem might be relatively new to you, right?
It's I've actually have used a bit of this as an epigraph for one of my books. Yeah, here's the small gasp of this clearing. But this poem is kind of rare for Ray in that it's not in sections, so that
numbered sections.
Like we were talking earlier about the act of make the relationship between the poem and the reader and the creative act of reading. Mm-hmm. That act is a bit different here because you have to take it all in one shot, where she usually breaks the poems down into bits, increments. Mm-hmm. So it's an incremental experience, and it's a different way of reading creatively. Yeah, it's a different way.
Right. Fantastic. Emily?
Yeah, I really love what Josh said about here referring to this particular poem, and I think that kind of tilts the way we can read the final line of "Here's the small gasp of this clearing come upon again." That this poem itself offers a way for us to be found and be kind of eternally found and never be lost. Yeah, it has a really lovely connotation.
Fantastic. Jason's next, and then Lil, and then we can go right to the phone call. The Twitter sphere is bursting. Colleen Knight, nice to hear Davey speaking about space, frame of sound, etc. And Nicola, our friend from southwest England, I believe, or Wales, I'm not sure. Sorry, Nicola. Puns. Here, here. Here, H-E-R-E. Here, H-E-A-R. The way. Here, the way. Pretty cool. Okay. Jason, your thought on the way?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I have two, and I'll be really quick. First is to, oddly, this just occurred to me, is to think about this fragmentary overhearing reminds me of flipping through the TV channels and making a poem of what I hear as I flip through, which reminds me of Frank O'Hara's moving through the city and having the random geography of the city be the thing that is that sequences the poem. The other is a fact that when I was 7, I was obsessed with the movie Grease for some reason. I remember being at a drive-in where in the out the rear window was Jaws, and at the front window was Grease. I might have been Jaws too.
Were you dreaming that?
No, my brother was slamming his head.
There are drive-ins where they do back-to-back?
Yeah, that was in 1977 or 9, when Grease came out. But what is important about this particular song that is quoted is that this was the disco song that was released along with the movie, whereas all the other songs from the movie were doo-wop 1950s songs. So the movie itself is an act of nostalgia or of displacement in time or of quoting time, whereas this song that's quoted was the disco release to coincide with the film, to catch the current audience.
Ray Armentrout is obsessed with layers of cultural archaeology. Later in this course in ModPo Plus, we have the poem about the Tennessee Waltz, which does exactly the same thing. Good point. Lily, quickly on the way, and then we'll take the phone call.
Okay, well, I missed a little bit of what everyone said on the phone, but my only thing to add here is more of a tone, an idea about tone. I think it's really important not to lose the darkness and the some of the sort of like terror or danger that's behind a lot of this poem. I think we tend to read the ending as very positive, and I want to push back on that by saying, for example, the story Made of Trees could be more of a Grimm's fairy tale forest where bad things happen to children who are abandoned. The Card and Pew Pocket could be in a Gothic church, a very scary architectural space to your child.
And then there's the person who didn't speak for a winter.
Right, and then Grease, can be kind of the danger there is in like actually a very scary vision of gender, if you think about what happens at the end of that movie. And there's actually an idea of emergencies. So I think, there's a positive reading to this poem, and then there's a very dark undertone. So I don't want to miss out on that in the reading.
When Ray Armentrout was here as a Writers' House Fellow, I think some of us some of us speculated on the darker reading. And Ray hadn't thought of it that way, but she came around to it, I believe.
Yeah.
And the idea of, in particular, in her memory of her mother introducing her to the scary Grimm's forest, Hansel, Gretel, following Crumb's reading experience, getting lost. It's both a very positive thing, but a very sad and difficult thing for her, because then you've got a parent introducing you to the lostness of reading and losing yourself, and it's like an alternative to people being your parents.
Right, and a very, very gripping and real memory that continues for a lot of people into childhood of a fear of being abandoned, just physically as a child being abandoned, not just a story.
Yes, and I think there's a whole 19th century tradition, and this has been written about by Anne Douglas and others, of women and girls in particular learning that the only place where they can get lost in a kind of liberating sense is in these giant books and novels that they were reading, the so-called cult of sentimentality. And that was an escape for girls and women, and also a place to get lost and be separated from the hurly-burly commercial life that was reality of the United States. So this is a major thing. Can we go to the phone? Thank you all for talking about The Way. That was fantastic. We're going to clip that and make that available subsequently in ModPo Plus as another conversation about difficult poem.
So this is Allison calling, and she just kind of wants to talk generally about lineage and how do we be contemporary readers of poems we're dislocated from in terms of time.
Okay, great. Hello, Allison.
Hello, Al. Great to talk to you
Wait a minute.
today.
Are you the same Allison who's been having computer problems?
Yes, this is Allison Fraser.
Oh, Allison, I'm
near Toronto.
Well, you may have not overcome your computer problems, but you know how to use a telephone.
I do. Well, actually, I have somehow, through magic, overcome some of them. I'm not sure what's happened overnight, but sometimes it's best, as with, our intellectual struggles, to just turn it off and leave it for a day. And sometimes when we turn it back on, we're lucky. So
Well,
I don't really know what happened, but I'm very happy.
Before I hear your question, I just want to turn to Zach and Chris. And I want either of them to grab a microphone. Isn't it the case, Zach and Chris, that so many here comes the mic, so many solutions to our technical problems, for instance in ModPo, they get solved by what might be called magic?
I would say, isn't that a real psychological phenomenon though, where you go to sleep and suddenly your problem solving kicks in? And you wake up and you know the answer to a question,
So
out of the blue.
You're not admitting to the magic. What you're saying is
Magic is very real as well.
Yeah. I mean, give the mic to Chris. Chris, isn't it true that hacks and kludges are really the way we've handled all of the problems in the 5 years of ModPo?
Oh, 100%. We haven't done anything by the textbook around here.
Not a single thing. And this is an occasion for me to do once again to acknowledge that what Zach and Chris do, not just for these webcasts, which is the most complicated program in the world of MOOCs, but behind the scenes in ModPo. Can we have snaps and claps for these two amazing people? You really are. You guys really make it all happen, so thank you. All right, Allison, are you still there?
Yes, and thank you very much from me as well. I have a feeling that what was resolved was something on your end and by the technical team. The page layout and everything looks a lot more normal today than what I was previously seeing. So whatever that page error was, I think was solved on your end.
Well, we are working with the Coursera engineers constantly, and hope most people don't see this. We're constantly fooling around with this new platform. It really feels like 2012 again, or 1996. Everything is sort of breaking and getting fixed, and fortunately you guys don't even realize it. And when you hear, when I write about the peer reviewing, you're going to know we've really come from a very difficult, complicated process to a much simpler one. We're very excited about it. So Allison, would you ask your question and then take the answers off the air?
Take the answers off the air. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have a very precise question. I definitely wanted to communicate with you
Good.
Today.
Glad you did.
I was telling Lily, are you hearing me, Al?
Yes, I can hear you, and Lily can hear you, and everybody can.
Okay, great. I'm hearing something else, and I'm not sure what it is.
Oh, you should turn down your computer sound and just listen to my voice on your phone.
It's not the... Oh, it is. Okay. It's all right. It's on the earbuds.
Okay, good.
I was thinking yesterday as I was exiting the public library. I'd had a rather trying day. I had emergency dental surgery.
You had what?
Another thing. I had an emergency root canal yesterday
Oh.
on my way to the library.
Oh, that's
It's
the
not
worst. That's worse than a lot of things.
everything's broken, including me at the moment. So it's just a bit of a running theme right now. I am a little behind due to the technical issues I've experienced. So I was thinking a little bit more on some of the things that were addressed in the last webcast, but just reading in the thread on the ModPo course forums, I did see that Shannon Radliff had posted something regarding the nature of imagination and the flow of information from knowledge, the known factors to the imagined, back to known factors. And I was talking to Lily on the phone regarding, on the way home from the library, I was really thinking about I Dwell in Possibility. And in the first time I took the ModPo course, of course, you're just trying to look inside the poems, right? And this, I think, relates to the creative experience of the reader that you were just discussing amongst you. And as Lily pointed out, too, it can also address issues of lineage. I was just thinking about where do I place myself in relation to this material? Where do I locate myself in this postmodern world, or are we in the postmodern world now? I don't know. I was just told a computer from 2007 is considered ancient, and my art historian, feelings just where do I locate myself with a statement like that? So I was thinking, where do I dwell? Emily dwells in possibility. Where do I dwell? And I was really tempted to think, I think I dwell in a constant crisis. But then I was thinking about the nature of crisis, and is everything in crisis all the time, or maybe nothing's a crisis. So I was kind of getting at that, and I think it does tie in a bit, as Lily noted that she feels that it does tie in with the issue of lineage, and I'm kind of interested too in our experience as a reader and where. Why are we reading these poems now? And someone had also posted a question regarding this question too. Did the poets, what was, oh gosh, I wish I could remember her name, but it was on the Facebook page. And what did the poets intend? Did the poets, what did they see for us in our time reading their material? And I would have to say they probably would just be extremely thrilled anyone's reading their material at this point. But, knowing poets. But yeah, I guess that it's not so much a question, but I'd love it if you could riff on it a bit and give your impressions of this issue. Where do we dwell, and how do we think about where we dwell?
All right. Terrific. It's a number of questions, but I think what I'm going to do is narrow it to one of the really compelling ones that I heard. And Allison, thank you for calling. And why don't you hang up, and we'll respond, and you can turn up your computer and listen to it. Good luck with the computing. Good luck with your mouth.
It will be fine.
You sound good. You sound fine. I hope the dentist gave you some really good drugs.
Yeah, no, I don't do the drugs. I'm good. I dwell in other planes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it sounds like the drugs are working. All right. Thank you. Allison, thank you so much. I'm glad the tech is working.
It's so great to talk to you, Al.
All right.
Everyone looks fantastic, and we'll see you soon.
All right,
Bye-bye.
thank you. What we're going to do is, Lil, let's unplug the phone. That'll be the last call. What we're going to do is I'm going to reinterpret some of Allison's questions and then go make a round of final thoughts based on that question. Okay? All right? So one of the things that she said that was most compelling to me was that she wonders why she's in the course, or to put it more narrowly, why she's compelled to study this poetry, and why should it speak to us, and why is it important in a world in which things are really moving very rapidly, or they seem to, in a world in which her computer built in 2007 is now ancient. Is that true of poetry? Does poetry push back against the speeding up of history? Why should postmodern poetry matter? And you can interpret that as you do your final words, TAs and friends and Joe. You can interpret that to be an excuse for saying why you think it's important that we're studying the lineages from, in this course, from Whitman and Dickinson forward, why it's important for us to respect the lines and innovations that keep accumulating, why it's important to be in a a literary history or a tradition, even though the tradition is avant-garde and constantly changing. So I bought you some time. So what I want you to do is try to make a final word based on that. And Dave Poplar, I know you're always good to start on this. Can you say something about why people should be studying this poetry or why people should be doing ModPo, even though the world of current events suggests that it's all for shit and that the world's going to, what, hell in a handbag, I guess is what we say. Do we still say that, Gabe?
Do we still say going to hell in a handbasket?
Yeah, do you? Did I say handbag? What is a handbasket?
Very gendered reading of that idiom, Al.
Gendered interestingly is what you mean. Handbasket is like what you put eggs in?
You're in a picnic.
But why would hell be in a handbasket? Davey?
Because just be like having a horrible picnic for eternity.
What? Nice. Easily.
You're making it up. You're bullshitting.
I think it's getting easily carried into hell, maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to use that again. Dave, we bought you some time. Why should any of this matter?
I was just going to say I have absolutely no idea about how to go about answering this question.
All right. Well, that is a Poplarian final word. You have something more to say, though, I know. Why is 5 years later, Dave, 5 years later, you're still here.
What? Why
5 years later, you're still here. Why? You must think it's important.
I do think it's important. I mean, right now, my thoughts on this aren't fully formed. I would just be bullshitting with intent, but I don't want to just start talking off the top of my head about something until my thoughts are at least partially formed.
Well, that would be a first.
You think?
We made 80 videos unedited, unprompted. I mean, surely some of that was off the top of your head.
I was going to give something a little more specific. I was going to approach the issue of authorial intent just because it was discussed in my office hours yesterday.
Yes,
and
yes.
Just a quick word on that was the question was about how much do we take into consideration, biographical information on the author's intent. And I mentioned that, well, this is a survey course, so it is fun to learn about that type of thing that we're reading, but it's also fun to read poems both ways, to read them with everything we present and everything we bring to the table, but then to try to just completely separate yourself and then look at the poem as if we didn't know a thing about the author and see what it says and if it's different. So that was what I was going to contribute, but it doesn't really answer your broad transcendental question.
That's okay. It's fine. You're the first, so we'll go further. Erica, your thought on any of this?
Like Dave, it's a tricky question. I'm still kind of figuring out what I'm thinking. I feel tempted to kind of take what might perhaps be the easy way out and quote Gertrude Stein.
History teaches that history teaches?
Let me recite what history teaches. History teaches.
Yeah. But since we haven't gotten to Gertrude Stein in this course, you owe us maybe a quick takeaway or paraphrase.
It's the last line of a poem of hers called "If I Told Him," a completed portrait of Picasso.
Yes.
And it's one of Stein's word portraits, and we're going to get to it, so I don't want to give too much of a spoiler. But the reason why I think I'm thinking about that poem is no matter how far away from the poet or the poem we're reading, I think that there is always some connection because we're still using language.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Max, final thoughts and an answer, a response to this question about why we read these poems and why it's important?
Well, my hope, this isn't exactly an answer as to why we read them, but my hope is that by reading them, or that by doing this, it gives us the tools to steel ourselves against or say whether I think what I would call this phenomenon of a kind of encroaching relativism that would underpin the crisis, right? That I think we feel in our current age, where we don't really seem to be able to put our finger on anything. Some of that is good, some of that is terrifying. But this practice of forming communities that are dedicated or committed to, devoted to communication, but not only communication amongst themselves, but also putting some pressure on the means of communication, on how we say what we say, right? My hope is that gives us some footing amidst all of that. That is my case for reading the canon or the lineage of avant-garde or modernist poetry, which since Yeats has been dealing with the widening gyre, right? That's, I think, what the crisis that we want to deal with, learn how to deal with.
All right, thank you so much, Max. Molly O'Neill, your thoughts?
I think the work of the poem is what undoes the separation chronologically and geographically and culturally and a lot of other ways. It kind of puts us on equal footing, that we're all working ourselves into the same material with the hopes of making it kind of more universally applicable. Does that make sense?
Very nice. Thank you, Molly. Josh, you get a final word since you're at the mic here.
Sure. I think a way to approach Allison's question would be answering it through a lens of talking about education, which is something that I'm super interested with ModPo in general, and to suggest that the best form, the most valuable form of education, perhaps isn't an individual standing in front of some slides, telling people what they should know, but rather giving people the tools, education as a medium for people to fill it with their own subjectivity and to make meaning of it themselves. And in doing that, in reading these poems as an education, these poets are giving us, especially modernist poets, it's giving us this space to fill it with our subjectivity, with our own experiences, to be almost as present in the moment as the poet is, and in establishing that presence and acknowledging this relationship with each other, makes these poems, in essence, timeless.
It's a great answer.
And there's always more work to be done. There's always, a different individual is going to fill that space differently, and it's an ongoing and I would argue boundless process.
It's a great answer. In sum, open texts, open education. Closed texts, been there, done that education. Delivery mechanism of information education. But an open text requires the colloquy, requires the ongoingness, requires rookies like you showing up and saying really, really profound things, not just about education, but about your own place. So to Allison, via Josh, your place with respect to the poems is the same as your place with respect to a whole host of open questions that you need to be part of solving rather than having answers delivered to you. That's why we care about this kind of poetry. Gabe, final thought?
About a different aspect of the question, just dealing with this, I think you said postmodern acceleration, something like that, or world in crisis kind of thing. Does the world always feel like it's in crisis? Yes. Has it felt like that for a very long time? Yes. I think one of the long-form lessons of the course seems to me to be that if one is a poet who views their job as a poet to reflect the world or express or create the world in representation in their writing, and the world is in crisis, I think we come to realize that you need a poem that is crisis-ing, that is doing crisis in some way, performing crisis, being crisis, something like that. And I think that'll come through really hard as we go along in the weeks. Probably starting with the communist poets maybe would be
Week 5?
Yeah, okay, week 5. Somewhere along those. And you, as a poet, you don't have to have that as your idea of what your role is. But there's a question that will come up again and again of a representational question. How do you represent something that is failing to be represented wholly?
Mm-hmm. Well put. Thank you.
WHOLL.
All right. Now we're going to have to get into a phase of brief final words. Davey, thoughts on this?
To pick up where you left off, Gabe, I think it's also we read this work to think about what can't be represented wholly and to think about what kinds of fragments can be put together and put together again. That like the process of being human is just like a process of grappling that sucks a lot. And to read work in this lineage is to like figure out how other people dealt with the inherent fragmentation of being human and to try to accept that fragmentation as maybe a process of something that can't be made whole. And reading work that's like Armentrout's work that's borrowing fragments, or even like Williams' thinking about the way that fragments turn on each other is just a way of dealing with how strange it is to be human and how other people have dealt with that strangeness.
Yeah. If it's strange to be human, then we should be reading strange poetry. That's really good. Joe, you're our honored guest. We're going to get you to be last or second to last. So we'll go to Emily, then Jason, then Lily, then Joe, then Al.
Yeah, as for the question of why we read older poets in this course, why we have a sense of history in this course, I think if we take the postmodern poets at their word and believe that their work that is doing this urgent work of decentering authority, of collaborating in an important way with a variety of voices, then I think it's possible to see these poets as collaborating in an important way with Dickinson and Whitman, as collaborating with the tradition that precedes them. And as for why we return to these poems, why we read poetry at all, my answer for questions like that has always been cyclical, is we do it because we like it because we do it, and I'm not really sure that's a kind of mystery that you can kind of resolve more fully than that, and it's an answer that I find kind of heartening, and and I'm content to leave kind of unresolved.
That's so Emily. Good, that's great. Okay, Jason, quickly, final thought?
I just want everyone to know that so this is deviation from the current flow of talk, but on October 7th, I'm going to be in Portland, Oregon, and would love to have a meetup with anyone in Portland or anyone in the larger Pacific Northwest who feels like driving a distance. So if you are there, if you're listening, if you see this later, go to the, go into
study groups and meetups?
Study groups and meetups, search for Portland, and let me know you're there. And the quick thought about what we're talking about, Josh singled out the word here from Ray Armentrout's poem, and I think that language is we heard a baby crying pre-language, but not yet entered into the pool of language yet, but language is the hearer of the mind, and poets just happen to be people who have really thought about language. So we're better to, so we can think of a lineage, but also of an ongoing, say, symposium of what it is to be in a mind and to be human.
Fantastic. Lily?
Oh yeah, just thinking about lineages specifically, I think lineages are their least helpful or most destructive when they're thought of from more of a critic's perspective, where the message they give you is like, you don't have a place in this world because you're not part of this lineage, or you're not the first person to have thought of this thing, therefore what you're doing is irrelevant, whatever. And lineages are at their most helpful when you're thinking of them without particular reverence, but thinking of them as something you can learn from, and also dismantle and consider how they came to be in the first place, which is, I think, the direction we're trying to go towards in ModPo by adding things like ModPo Plus and thinking metapedagogically as we're going through the course, rather than saying this is a very strict and revered and exalted and important modernism to postmodernism trend, and there's no room for a person that doesn't fit into whose voices typically got to count in this lineage in modern day. So
it's great. It's one of the great advances of old printed anthologies that were used in classes until they got outmoded, and now a MOOC can be constantly correcting itself and changing and expanding, and the curriculum changes, and you could do that with subsequent editions of anthologies, but generally in the small colleges where I went to school, we were using an old anthology, and therefore that was the truth. Joe, honored guest, thank you so much for being part of us.
It's great to be here.
We're gonna tell a lot of people about this this reading group on Sid. Do you have some final thoughts?
I do, yeah. I'm thinking about Sid and how he would have responded to this question. And I remember there's a great YouTube video. It's taken from his telephoned visit to the writer's house. I'll post it in the subform for the Corman discussion that I'm leading right now. But you could find it right now if you go to YouTube and put Sid Corman, Why Does Poetry Matter, something like that. And to paraphrase Sid, it's about being in the present moment, about one's own humanness, how to relate to a world that's always corrupting language and using it for pretty insidious means. So it's a stand against that kind of degradation, ultimately just about being human and present. But he says it better than I just did. So go listen to that. And I'll post the link later.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much. Okay, some final thoughts from me. Shout out to Jill Sharp. Jill wrote, I highly recommend returning to ModPo for a second year. Now it's no longer the shock of the new. I'm appreciating the poems much more deeply, and ModPo Plus is excellent. I've greatly enjoyed Joe Massey's contribution there. Hi, Joe. And Jill says something really important, which is ModPo is not meant to be done in 1 year. You need to kind of join us, stay enrolled, and come back and do more. And Jill's doing that. She recommends it. A shout out to Virgil Houston and Mandana Chaffa. So Virgil and Mandana are in different parts of the world. We've gotten to know each other. They're very different people. And they've known each other for 3 years through ModPo. They're both CTAs now, community TAs. Virgil visited New York for the first time in 40 plus years, and the two of them met up, and they both exclaimed, ModPo brings different people together. So you can visit them in a thread created by Virgil in the general discussion forum, which includes a photo of the two of them in Central Park. We're glad ModPo enables friendships. And a shout out finally to Beth, who goes by Beth, no last name, in ModPo, who said in a conversation with me that she doesn't think she's very good at interpreting poetry. And I said I was curious to know why you didn't think you're very good at it, and she responded, first of all, praising me as a good teacher for asking, and then she said, the first thing is my ignorance, simple lack of exposure. But the second, she says, is my personality. I'm a literal sort of person. I read for ideas rather than appreciating the vehicle, the form, the mode. I tend to want to read about what I value and like already. Already this course has affected both of these things, so maybe you can teach poetry appreciation. And here's what I wrote back, and this is my final thought. Well, Beth, one of the reasons that you give here, I think, is the most important one. Of the reasons you give here, the most important one, I think, is I am a literal sort of person. An alternative to literalness is a major, major mode or way of being that ModPo can teach you. Loosen up on language. Let a word mean several things at once. Open, not closed. Connote rather than denote. I sound like Gertrude Stein. Connote rather than denote. Don't let words point to things. Let them point outward to everything. And really, if there is any kind of social aspect to the ModPo reformism, it is that. We are trained in this world to operate through a literal embrace or reception of semantic meaning. We need to go through the world learning how to get places and do things and be functional. And that's all well and good. But I wish that language wasn't 99.9% that and only 0.1% connotative, open-ended, gray-areaed, expansive, and a moving target. I wish that it was 5%. So here's hoping that we can go from 0.1% to 5%. It'll still be fine for the denotators of the world. 95% is still a lot. But 5%, to reclaim that for the human species would be a really great thing, because we need more nuance, we need more gray areas. We're going to go out thanking you for joining us, thanking Mary, Eric, Stephanie, Josh, Susan, Katie, Emily Proctor, Allison, Chris, Linda Ireland for calling in, and others, and my gang here, especially Joe. Thank you so much. We're going to go out by listening to Sid, who is basically asking us to stay in the poem, because if you don't, if you abandon the poem, he will be gone, and we don't want him to be gone. So here's Sid, wishing you well until next week.
All right. It isn't for want of something to say, something to tell you, something you should know, but to detain you, keep you from going, feeling myself here as long as you are, as long as you are.
We only ask that you be detained for 10 weeks of ModPo and maybe beyond. We want to detain you, keep you from going. Thank you all. Thank you, Zach and Chris, for a great webcast, and we'll talk to you very soon. Signing off from the Writer's House.